Chapter 3: The Grassy Knoll, Gunman or Chimera. The idea that President Kennedy was shot by an assassin firing from the grassy knoll ahead and to the right of his car, rather than from a window of the Texas School Book Depository, is remarkable in two ways. Number one, it is the favorite theory among all those advanced by critics of the Warren Commission report, and number two, it has the least evidence to support it, evidence that is based entirely on the testimony of eyewitnesses. Shortly after the assassination, early theorists who had never viewed Dealey Plaza, such as Thomas Buchanan, zeroed in on the triple underpass directly ahead of Kennedy's car as the most likely spot from which an assassin, other than Oswald, might have attempted an ambush. The triple underpass is a viaduct through which three streets, Commerce, Main, and Elm, pass under the railroad tracks leading into Dallas Union Station. Kennedy's car was proceeding toward the underpass on Elm Street when he was shot. In their eagerness to prove Oswald was innocent, or at least that there was a conspiracy involving other gunmen, they were encouraged, no doubt, by those early newspaper reports that there was a hole in the windshield of the president's car and that a doctor at Parkland had said there was an entrance wound in the president's throat. It was to them an open and shut case. A mysterious killer had fired from atop the railroad overpass or from under it, and the only thing holding up a solution of the crime was the fact that Texas officials, and perhaps federal officials too, were part of a murder conspiracy. Thus, there was a triple underpass theory, to which Mark Lane himself once subscribed, before there was a Grassy Knoll theory. The triple underpass became untenable as the perch for a gunman, even in literature, as evidence began to accumulate. None of the approximately 15 men on the overpass, including 2 policemen, had seen an assassin there. Neither had anyone in the approaching motorcade. When the hole in the windshield of the president's car turned out to be a nick on the inside of the glass, the notion that a shot had been fired from directly ahead of the president collapsed, and so did the underpass theory. But out of a deposition and later the testimony of one man who witnessed the tragedy from the overpass, a new theory was hatched, or as one of the critics of the Warren report, Edward J. Epstein, put it, the theoreticians then moved slightly over to the right and crept on to the grassy knoll. The man who unwittingly came to the aid of the theoreticians was S.M. Holland, a 57-year-old signal supervisor for the Union Terminal Company, who went to the overpass that morning to help police identify railroad men who wanted to stand there as the motorcade passed below. After the shooting, Holland went to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office and made a deposition in which he said that after he heard what he thought for the moment was a firecracker, he looked to his left, toward the grassy knoll on the president's right, and saw a puff of smoke come from the trees. After that, he said, he heard 3 more shots, but that was the only puff of smoke I saw. He added at the end of his deposition that everything is spinning in my head. Holland's puff of smoke story, which he has never told quite the same since in testimony or interviews, is at the heart of Lane's grassy knoll theory. He propounded this theory in his 2 opening chapters by parlaying bits of testimony before the commission, plus interviews he conducted later, into what appeared to be, to some reviewers, a convincing circumstantial case that something happened on the grassy knoll. Although none of his eyewitnesses agreed on what happened, and none claimed to have seen a gun or gunman there, versus 5 witnesses who saw a rifle or rifleman in the 6th floor depository window, a close examination of Lane's witnesses is in order. It reveals, among other things, that Lane distorted their testimony in his book in an effort to substantiate his theory. Lane begins by invoking 2 witnesses, Julia Ann Mercer, a 23-year-old employee of the Dallas Vending Machine Company, and Lee Bowers, Jr., a 38-year-old railroad tower man, in an effort to get his gunman onto the grassy knoll before the shooting begins. In her deposition, Miss Mercer told the sheriff's office that while driving west on Elm Street toward the triple underpass on the morning of the assassination, her path was blocked by a green Ford pickup truck parked at the right curb. It bore Texas license plates and had the words "air conditioning" lettered on its left side. She recalled seeing a man wearing a gray jacket, brown pants, and plaid shirt, as best as I can remember, get what appeared to be a gun case out of the back of the truck and walk up the grassy knoll. In his book, Lane anoints this incident with an air of mystery. This, obviously, is his grassy knoll gunman. He hints also at his conspiracy theory by pointing out Miss Mercer said in her affidavit that while she was delayed by the truck, 3 policemen stood nearby. Thus, a truck was parked illegally and blocked traffic while a man carried what appeared to be a rifle case up a grassy slope in the presence of Dallas police officers, he reports ominously. Thereafter, he slyly refers to the object that appeared to be a gun case to Miss Mercer simply as the gun case, without qualification. He also neglects to mention a couple of other things in her affidavit. First, Miss Mercer originally described the objects in the rear of the trunk as what appeared to be toolboxes. One of them appeared to be a gun case only after she warmed to her narrative. Second, the hood of the truck was open, a worldwide distress signal for motorists, and 2 of its wheels were up over the curb. Parking illegally on a busy Dallas thoroughfare in such an ostentatious manner in the presence of 3 police officers would hardly seem to be the proper approach to a sniper's nest, unless, of course, the reader accepts that all 3 police officers were in on the plot. Even then, it would seem unnecessary in view of the fact that there was a parking lot behind the grassy knoll, but Lane never let such details interfere with his theories. The most questionable thing about his use of the Mercer deposition, insignificant as it is that he fails to put it in context. The truth is that Miss Mercer's affidavit was one of the some 60-odd similar statements volunteered to the sheriff's office after the assassination, each putting a different gunman or suspicious person at a different location somewhere near the scene of the murder. Miss Mercer's statement was no more startling than many others that wound up in volume 19 of the hearings. It follows a statement by another Dallas citizen who said he saw a very thick-chested man, nearly 6 feet 5 inches tall and weighing 250 pounds, perhaps a professional football player, carrying a rifle near Elm Street just minutes before the assassination. It is followed by another Texan's recollection that he saw a man about 5'4" to 5'6" carrying a foreign-made rifle with a long blue steel barrel and a long yellow stock shortly after the shooting. Indeed, to read the volunteer depositions taken by scores of investigators in the hours following the death of the president is to learn that Dallas was a city crawling with riflemen, big, small, young and old, and clogged with mysterious vehicles, trucks, dark sedans, and compacts in the hours before the fatal shot was fired. Law officers patiently noted every vivid detail, as they should have, and the Warren Commission properly included all of them in its 17,814 pages of hearings. But without any other evidence, Miss Mercer's man is no more suspect than dozens of others, except to Mark Lane. Lane's number 2 witness in his Grassy Knoll scenario, Bowers, was working in a 14-foot tower over the railroad tracks just north of the overpass that morning. His tower afforded him a view of the backside of the knoll and of a parking lot on railroad property but used by employees of the sheriff's office. Between his tower and the knoll, not content to have a mystery man with a gun case walk up the knoll from Elm Street, Lane invokes Bowers in an effort to show that other mysterious persons approached or reconnoitered the knoll from the rear. First, in a deposition and then in testimony before the commission, Bowers said he saw 3 unfamiliar cars enter the parking lot that morning. Although he testified he was operating the switches and signals controlling the movement of trains, he had a surprisingly precise recollection of both the cars and their drivers. The first was a blue and white 1959 Oldsmobile station wagon with out-of-state license plates and two stickers on it, one a Goldwater 64 sticker and the other advertising some scenic location. The second was a 1957 Ford with Texas license plates, with one male in it that seemed to have a mic or telephone or something. The third was a white 1961 or 1962 Chevrolet four-door Impala, bearing the same type of out-of-state license plates as the first car, and also a Goldwater sticker. Bowers testified that the first two cars came in and went out of the lot. This is not surprising in view of the fact that the lot forms a cul-de-sac at the dead end of an extension of Elm Street. The third car, he said, was forced to back out some considerable distance, then slowly cruised back down toward the book depository. Then did he leave? Asked a commission lawyer. The last I saw of him, he was pausing just above the assassination site, Bowers replied. In his book, predictably, Lane uses that statement for maximum effect, quoting it at the end of a long passage in which he makes the three cars and their occupants sound like the outriders of a many-membered pro-Barry Goldwater assassination gang. He neglects to quote the next anticlimactic question and answer from the transcript. Did the car park or continue, or did you notice? Whether it continued on at that very moment or whether it pulled up only a short distance, I couldn't tell. I was busy. Lane also neglects to tell his readers that in his deposition, Bowers swore the third car left the area at about 12:25, 5 minutes before the assassination. Instead, with the mystery car left just above the assassination site in the reader's mind, Lane goes on to two men Bowers said he saw standing in the parking lot and invests them with a conspiratorial look. Lane says on his own that in appearance they were not unlike the two men Miss Mercer saw with the Ford pickup truck. He notes that to Bowers they were the only two strangers in the area and solemnly states that they were facing the presidential motorcade as it approached. What is really remarkable, rather than portentous about the scene Lane depicts, is that with the President of the United States about to pass by and hundreds of people milling into the area, there were only two men in the parking lot Bowers did not recognize. It would be even more remarkable if those men had not faced the presidential motorcade as it approached. And finally, it would have been remarkable in the first place if one or two men bent on killing Kennedy had gone to an area which, according to Bowers' testimony, had been covered by police for some 2 hours and which served as a parking lot for the sheriff's office. Unless, of course, one accepts Lane's mammoth conspiracy with both the Dallas police and the sheriff's office, down to the rank of patrolman and deputy, involved in a plot to kill the president. Even then, it is difficult to explain the fact that more than 100 bystanders, including 50 or more policemen, rushed to the top of the knoll immediately after the shots were fired and found no weapon or trace of a weapon having been fired there. Asked to explain what he saw, Bowers told the commission, "I just am unable to describe, rather than it was something out of the ordinary, a sort of milling around, but something occurred in this particular spot which was out of the ordinary, which attracted my eye for some reason which I could not identify." In excerpting this answer in his book, Lane leaves out the phrase, "a sort of milling around," which was the closest Bowers came to describing what actually caught his eye. Instead, he quotes only the last part of the response, then charges that when Bowers tried to describe what he saw in answer to the next question, he was cut off. Joseph Ball, assistant commission counsel, did interrupt Bowers as he wound up for another attempt at describing the commotion that attracted his attention, but Lane, and magnifying this incident doesn't tell his readers that Ball had asked Bowers twice before to describe the commotion, and twice at the end of his testimony asked him if he recalled anything further. Bowers replied he could remember nothing else. Instead, Lane produces a bit of what he says is a later filmed interview with Bowers, in which Bowers, in response to a Lane question, says, "There was a flash of light, or as far as I'm concerned, something I could not identify." With this, Lane finally has a flash of light from Bowers to go with the puff of smoke from Holland. To clinch his Grassy Knoll theory, he then reports that, by his count, 58 of 90 witnesses who were asked where they thought the shots came from said that shots came from the direction of the Grassy Knoll and not from the book depository building. This is an interesting statistic, but like all of Lane's figures, it deserves close scrutiny. For one thing, many witnesses were ambivalent or self-contradictory on the point of origin of the shots. Lane's star Grassy Knoll witness, Holland, after testifying he saw that puff of smoke over the knoll, went on to say that the first 2 or 3 shots came from the upper part of the street, indicating the school book depository. Since this contradicted his earlier deposition, in which he said the firecracker-like noise came first and from the knoll, Commission counsel pursued the matter. Question: You had no idea, I take it, that the shots were coming from your area? Answer: No. It is important to observe that this exchange is not included in Lane's book, where Holland is undoubtedly counted as one of the 58 who said the shots came from the direction of the Grassy Knoll. Neither is the testimony of several other witnesses who told the Commission that in Dealey Plaza, with tall buildings at one end and the triple underpass at the other, it is almost impossible to pinpoint the origin of some sounds. The testimony of Lane's other star Grassy Knoll witness on this point is illuminating. Bowers: I heard 3 shots, 1, then a slight pause, then 2 very close together, also reverberations from the shots. Ball: And were you able to form an opinion as to the source of the sound or what direction it came from? Bowers: The sounds came either from up against the school book depository building or near the mouth of the triple underpass. Ball: Were you able to tell which? No, I could not. Ball: Well now, had you had any experience before being in the tower as to sounds coming from those various places? Bowers: Yes, I had worked the same tower for some 10 or 12 years and was there during the time they were renovating the school book depository building, and had noticed at that time the similarity of sounds occurring in either of these 2 locations. There is a similarity of sound because there is a reverberation which takes place from either location. The Commission found that witnesses who were near the book depository thought the shots came from that building, while those near the underpass thought they came from the underpass Grassy Knoll area. By Lane's count, 13 out of 15 witnesses from the motorcade moving between the 2 locations expressed the opinion they came from the book depository. But here again, Lane falls back on the conspiracy theory. Since most witnesses from the motorcade were policemen and government officials or their wives, he says, their testimony should be cautiously assessed because of the obvious possibility that it might be colored. He does not say by whom it might be colored or for what purpose. One well-known witness Lane invokes as a believer that the shots came from the Grassy Knoll is Abraham Zapruder, the Dallas dressmaker and amateur cameraman who made a color movie of the assassination from the curb downhill from the Grassy Knoll. Lane quotes a Secret Service report as stating, according to Mr. Zapruder, the position of the assassin was behind Mr. Zapruder. In his testimony, Mr. Zapruder was less precise. When asked if he thought the shots came from behind him, he replied, Actually, I couldn't say what I thought at the moment, where they came from. After the impact of the tragedy, I started yelling, "They've killed him!" I assumed that they came from there because as the police started running back of me, it looked like it came from back of me. In this answer, Zapruder made a point scrupulously avoided by Lane, but brought out by many other witnesses. They formed their opinion or assumed that the shots came from the knoll because they saw policemen, including the motorcycle cop who rode up the bank with drawn pistol, converging on the knoll. Rather than note this phenomenon or the problem of sound reverberations, which also confused Zapruder, Lane moves on to another point, namely that Dallas Police Chief Jesse E. Curry, just after the shots were fired, said into the microphone of his radio transmitter, "Get a man on top of that triple underpass and see what happened up there." This is not surprising since Curry, leading the president's car to Parkland Hospital, was at that moment heading through the underpass. As he did, he saw the railroad men overhead scrambling for cover. But again, we find that Lane has culled carefully from the record, this time from the Dallas police radio log of that day, almost the only bit of evidence adaptable to his theory. Actually, as Curry sped away from the scene, radio reports from other officers in Dealey Plaza focused immediate attention on the book depository. At 12:34 p.m. came the first report. "I just talked to a guy up there who was standing close to it, and the best he could tell, it came from the school book depository here with that Hertz renting sign on top of it." At 12:36 came another report. "I have a witness that says it came from the 5th floor of the Texas Book Depository store." At 12:38, "We have a man here who says he's seen him pull the weapon back through the window from southeast corner of that depository building." The depository was then surrounded, and at 12:45, the first description of the rifleman, closely matching that of Oswald, was broadcast. There were no more broadcasts concerning the overpass or the Grassy Knoll, for the simple reason that the policemen who swarmed into that area found nothing more that could be connected to the Kennedy murder. In contrast, within an hour of the assassination, police searching the book depository found a rifle and 3 empty shells fired by that rifle near a 6th-floor window. The hard physical evidence tallied with the stories of 5 credible witnesses and one whose testimony the commission later discounted, who saw a rifle or rifleman in that window. Within another hour, police had captured a suspect who worked on the 6th floor of the depository, who owned the rifle found there, and whose palm print was found on the rifle. Later, ballistics experts testified that the only bullets or bullet fragments recovered were fired from that rifle, to the exclusion of all others. And gunshot wound experts testified that the bullets which struck the president came from the direction of the book depository. On this basis, after careful exploration of the triple underpass and Grassy Knoll possibilities, the commission concluded the shots which killed President Kennedy and wounded Governor Connally were fired from the 6th-floor window at the southeast corner of the Texas School Book Depository. There is no credible evidence that the shots were fired from the triple underpass ahead of the motorcade or from any other location. This is the same record on which Lane concludes there is some evidence to suggest that 1 or more shots may have been fired from the book depository, as the Warren Commission maintained. It is considerably less compelling than the evidence suggesting that shots came from behind the fence on the Grassy Knoll. To this bit of casuistry, Lane adds an ironic charge that the Commission cited evidence out of context, ignored and reshaped evidence, and, which is perhaps worse, oversimplified evidence.